Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the September edition of the Lotsa Helping Hands Inspiration Webinar Series. My name is Brooks Kenny, and we are delighted to have so many of you on the line with us today to talk about a very critical topic in caregiving, the Sandwich Generation. Our guest speaker today is Sherri Snelling. Sherri is the CEO and founder of the Caregiving Club and is a nationally recognized expert on caregiving issues. She's the former chairman of the National Alliance for Caregiving and is a frequent blogger and writer on caregiving topics. And so she is going to be sharing with us her thoughts and expertise on the Sandwich Generation, and we're delighted to have Sherri with us today. Prior to Sherri's remarks, I'm going to just briefly walk you through a bit of background about Lotsa Helping Hands, just to ensure that you have that information as well. I know that among the hundreds of you who've registered for our webinar this afternoon, many of you are part of a Lotsa Helping Hands community, but many of you are here to also learn more, and you may not yet be part of the growing Lotsa Helping Hands family. So I want to begin just to spend about 5 minutes walking you through Lotsa Helping Hands. The service really is designed to support caregivers, but begins with our vision. And at Lotsa Helping Hands, we really do believe in a world where everyone can give and receive help through the power of their community. And our service really was designed to support caregivers. And we understand that caregivers need help to manage all of the responsibilities that they have in their life. And we do imagine a world where every caregiver who needs help can find it, and anyone that wants to help a caregiver can have a place to go. And at Lotsa Helping Hands, we really focus on providing our free service to bring caregivers and volunteers together in order to provide that help. We power online communities. All communities are created through Lotsa Helping Hands, are either private or open to invite volunteers to support the caregiver. And we connect caregivers and volunteers through these community websites that are designed to organize help during a medical crisis, when a caregiver might be exhausted, or if a caregiver is helping an aging parent. Many people that participate in our communities want to volunteer to help a friend or a loved one, but they aren't necessarily sure how to get started. And among the millions who've participated, we know that caregivers are often very overwhelmed by the very well-meaning, but the amount of offers of help that they get. And so we designed Lotsa Helping Hands to support the caregiver and to bring together their circles of community, their family, their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers, people from their religious community, all of those folks who want to help the caregiver and family who are going through a medical crisis, but they're not exactly sure how. And that's where Lotsa Helping Hands comes in. So if you go to lotsahelpinghands.com, you can read more about the service. You can find the resources that are right for you, whether you're a caregiver caring for a loved one, whether you want to help a loved one, or whether you just want to volunteer in your community. You can easily click on the Get Started tab and create a community of support, or you can request to join a community. Within every Lotsa Helping Hands community, there are some features that I just want to highlight for you. And this is a sample that is called Susan's Helping Hands. And Susan's husband, Jack, had a stroke, and she created a community along with her friends to organize help during his recovery. This is a sample of a community where you can see there's a help calendar that allows people to easily sign up for tasks that the family may need assistance with. So perhaps it's meals on Monday, Wednesday, Friday evenings, or rides to medical appointments on Thursday afternoons, or perhaps help with childcare or picking up at soccer practice for children in the family. The calendar is a core aspect of this service, and the system sends reminders to all the volunteers to let people know what is happening in the community and what needs are met in order to support the family. So this is just the homepage of the community website as an example. In addition to the calendar, we also have a series of community building features in the community, recognizing that members spend a lot of time here in their Lotsa Helping Hands community. And so we wanted to make the service one that allows you to share information, share photos, updates, provide comments, and really connect with the other members who are part of the community and support of the family. So we have message boards where you can share a note or an update to the family, where you can read updates from the family. We have a well wishes wall where you can post a prayer, you can post a note to say hello, just to let the family know that you're thinking about them. Again, all of this is within the private community website at Lotsa Helping Hands. And then in addition, we have a vital information section within the community website. And this is a place where you can keep important information all in one place. You can use the vital information section to store details about medications, doctors, allergies, insurance, and anything else that you might need during your caregiving journey. What's great about this section is that the coordinator of the community, that person who kind of administers all of the details within the community, they can make this information available to everyone who's part of the community, or just to select family members, perhaps the immediate family. So not everyone needs to see all of the information that's stored within vital information. So that's a very, very quick, brief overview of Lotsa Helping Hands, the service. We just wanted to give you that context that it is a service that organizes the help for caregivers and brings those caregivers and volunteers together in order to support the family. And we encourage you all on the line today to take a look at lotshelpinghands.com. The service is free, and we are happy to take any questions at the end, and certainly can get you in touch with us if you're interested in creating a community for yourself or someone that you love. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherri Snelling. Again, we are so fortunate to have Sherri on the line with us today to share her wisdom, specifically as it relates to helping caregivers balance self-care while caring for a loved one. In addition to the other accolades I shared earlier, Sherri is a frequent speaker on caregiving and boomer women, and has recently written a new book, which will be published by Balboa Press, a division of Hay House Publisher, next February. And Sherri, we're looking forward to sharing with our audience towards the end of the presentation more about that book and what they can do to make sure they have it in their hands as soon as it's out. So with that, I just share our thanks with you for what you're going to be talking about today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you, Brooks, for the introduction. And in fact, the group today is going to get a little bit of a preview or a sneak peek, if you will, at the book, because a lot of the stuff that I will share with you today is actually going to be part of that book that'll be out next February. So, but we're here to talk about the sandwich generation, which is an important segment of the 65 million Americans who are caring for loved ones today. So, you know, there's a lot of talk in the media and everybody about the sandwich generation, but who is the sandwich generation? And as you can see here, it's, you know, about 38% of all caregivers, so about 24 million people, are squeezed between caring for a child who is still at home and needing help and care, and also an older parent typically who is needing care. So you're in the middle, and you're squeezed or stretched depending on your definition. What's really interesting is that given the state of the economy, what we've seen lately is that two things are happening for these sandwich generation caregivers. One is that children are actually living at home longer under mom and dad's roof, even though they may go off to college because they're finding jobs harder and harder to secure. They're coming back home to live with mom and dad. At the same time, the U.S. Census data that we have is showing that there's been about a 15% increase in what we call multi-generational households, which means there's 3 generations under one roof. So very often what we're seeing right now is the older kids at home, obviously the sandwich generation caregiver, and then an older parent or parents living in the same house. And these are all just economic realities. So whether your older parent is living with you or not, these sandwich generation caregivers are juggling a lot, and that's why I call it the juggling act, because you've got, really three balls, if you will, that are in the air. You've got your children, you've typically got your career. As you saw on the previous page, 7 out of 10 sandwich generation caregivers are working either full or part-time, and now you've also got the care of your parent. And that is a very stressful situation. What happens is, as your caregiving continues, and perhaps you have prolonged periods of chronic stress, you just don't have enough time to really focus as much on yourself. And this is where I really focus a lot of my writing, is on this whole concept around self-care. What are the impacts and the health risks of not taking care of yourself while caregiving, and what can you do about it? So what we do know is that chronic stress can result in things like insomnia, poor nutrition, lack of exercise, you're missing your important doctor or dental appointments, and ultimately maybe even suffering from some depression. So what we talk about in terms of stress is really, it is public enemy number one when it comes to the caregiving generation, and particularly the sandwich generation. Um, there is a great book out there called So Stressed, which really focuses on all of the great research and studies that have been done specifically about women and how women are impacted by stress. And what they found is that the evolution of women's biology over the last 100 years has really not kept pace with this expanded role now that women are playing in our society. We're mothers, we're career women, and now we're also caregivers, particularly for older parents. And we have all these great advances in technology, particularly communication technology, which is supposed to help us in a lot of areas of our life, but it's actually negatively impacting our body's defenses to protect us and heal us. And so this constant disturbance that we get with text messaging and emails and cell phone calls puts our body on high alert at all times. And really what the researchers have found is that it is isolating us rather than connecting us. And I think that's a really important distinction, because one of the things that I've heard in talking to caregivers across the country is a very common theme, and that is, I feel all alone. And I think that even though we do have resources and opportunities out there to get help, and we've got technology that keeps us connected, we do actually feel isolated. And so there are some things we can do to overcome that I'll talk about a little bit later on. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting in a lot of the research I did for the book is that everything has a name now, a syndrome, right? So when we suffer from chronic stress, particularly as women, there is something that happens called subjective cognitive impairment, and the researchers are now labeling this as busy life syndrome. So this is something that the sandwich generation is definitely encountering, is this busy life syndrome with stress. We know that the American Psychological Association, actually, they do an annual report on stress in America, and they found that 36% of all employees suffer from some type of chronic stress from their work. And the National Alliance for Caregiving said, actually, this goes up when you're a caregiver who's also working, and it's actually closer to about 50% of those caregivers who are working who suffer from chronic stress. So, all of this stress in our life, I think stress is something that is somewhat natural, but we do have to come up with techniques and ways to manage it, and outlets, so that we can balance what's happening in our lives, because it has very severe health impacts. I came across a study that was done recently, actually this year, by Bowling Green State University, and I thought this was really interesting, because we're talking about sandwich generation caregivers who are primarily women. But what this study looked at was, what is the difference in stress when it comes to men and women? And I thought that was a really interesting topic. And here's what they found. They found, and this is specifically caregivers now, this is who they studied, men and women who were caring for an older parent. And they found that men tend to take this block and tackle approach. So let's use the football analogy. And it actually helps them cope with stress. So as women, we're socialized to be nurturers, to take care of people. And actually, that does make us better caregivers, according to the researchers. But the other thing that we do is we internalize our performance as a caregiver, and we worry more. Are we doing enough? Are we doing it right? Are we spending enough time? And that kind of internalization of our performance is actually adding to our stress level as a female caregiver, whereas men, they're taking their emotions out of it and they're really taking a task-oriented approach and they're problem solving. Okay, I've got to do this today for mom. Let's take care of it, check it off the list, move on. The other thing I found really interesting in their study is that the men who are caring for an older parent actually ask for more help, which, and no offense to the men out there who are listening in, but I had to chuckle a little bit because I think most women will relate to this. If you're in a car with a man and you get lost, they typically don't turn off the side of the road to ask for help or want to, seek out help. But in a caregiving situation, they will. They are more often than women reaching out and asking others for support and help. And I think that, again, is a really important tool and lesson learned for the female caregivers out there that we're going to talk about a little bit later. So all of this chronic stress, and by the way, I want to mention a couple of resources for everyone out there. If you're feeling chronic stress as a caregiver, what you can do is there are a couple of really great caregiver stress tests. And one is from the American Medical Association. It's called the Caregiver Self-Assessment. You can find it on their website. And the other is from the Alzheimer's Association, which is obviously specific to dementia caregivers. But it asks a series of questions that help really evaluate what your true stress level is. And if you find that you're scoring off the charts in those tests, you really need to take that into your doctor, sit down and talk with them about, okay, this is what I'm suffering from. How do I manage this better? What can we do? And I would just caution people to make sure you're taking a caregiver stress test, because if you were to go to Google and just simply put in stress test, you will find other stress tests from the Mayo Clinic and other organizations, but those might be dealing more with heart health or other things that aren't specific to caregiving, and I just want to make that distinction. So chronic stress really becomes what we call burnout. I call stress the cause and burnout the effect. And, burnout, which a lot of people also call compassion fatigue, is really this blowback, if you will, of self-neglect that caregivers suffer from. And it's not, as a caregiver, you're not purposely trying to ignore your own needs. It's just that you're taking care of everyone else. You're taking care of your job. You're taking care of your kids. You're taking care of your parent. You're taking care of your spouse, and the person who gets taken care of last is you, if you have time, and often you don't. And so this kind of burnout is really classic, particularly in caregivers who, the average caregiver spends about 4.6 years caring for a loved one. And so that's not a sprint, that's a marathon. And if you're caring for someone with Alzheimer's, it can actually be longer. It can be an 18 or 20-year caregiving journey. So that kind of prolonged stress and burnout really can have tremendous health impacts. So what are the classic signs of burnout? Chronic fatigue, certainly not getting enough restorative sleep, and we'll talk a little bit about sleep in a minute. You might be cranky, irritated, and frustrated, which I'm sure a lot of us can raise our hands and say, yeah, I felt that way. But it's not just one incident, it's really all the time. You are feeling depression or sadness, you're feeling hopeless, maybe alienated, or as we talked about, isolated. You can't focus or concentrate easily, and you're distracted often. You're missing a lot of appointments, and you're particularly canceling or not making your annual doctor or dental appointments. You might have frequent emotional outbursts, such as crying a lot or maybe getting angry and yelling, whether it's at your children or your spouse or your friends or even your older parent. You might turn to alcohol or prescription drugs or sleeping aids to cope. Often we see, actually, it's about 10% of caregivers are turning to old habits like smoking to just cope with the stress that they're feeling. And again, these are all tremendous health impacts. Your appetite is changing. You're either eating a lot more or maybe a lot less. But all of this bad news doesn't mean that it's a mission impossible. That it actually is possible to banish burnout. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We talked about that you're doing this juggling act, and the three C's, the children, career, and caregiving. And so because of juggling, I thought, the circus is a great analogy. So you are managing the three-ring circus. And what are the ways that you can really manage that circus a little bit better? And I came up with 7 tips, 7 areas with all the experts that I talk to out there in various areas, whether it's nutrition or fitness or sleep deprivation. I came up with these 7 powerful tips. And 7 is actually a very powerful number. For those of you who are interested, there's the 7 sisters, which is the magical constellation of stars. Obviously, in children's literature, we have the 7 dwarfs, which helped Snow White, and the Magnificent 7 for men out there were, the tremendous macho cowboys who saved the town. So these are your Magnificent 7 tips on how to help you banish your stress and your burnout. As I spoke earlier, sleep is probably the most important thing that you can do. It sounds just natural. Well, of course, yes, I need to get enough sleep, but I really want to talk to you about what is the importance of sleep. And if you do any of these 7, I would say sleep really is the most important. First of all, we know that 50% of people over the age of 65 do suffer from sleep disorders that actually shorten their lives. And 70 million Americans right now are actually having sleep problems. And so it's really interesting because if you're not getting enough sleep, there's a new term that is called sleep debt. And, we all have so much debt in our lives anyway. We hear about it every day in the news, but now we have something new to add, which is sleep debt. There is a great researcher, Susan Zafar Lofty, and she is the director of the Institute for Sleep and Wake Disorders. And what she told me is that sleep debt is really like credit card debt. If you keep accumulating your credit card debt, you're going to pay high interest rates. Your account will ultimately be shut down until you pay it off. And it's the same with sleep. If you accumulate too much sleep debt, your body is going to crash. So what really is the importance of sleeping? Well, there was a study done recently that showed that if you lose 2 hours of sleep every night, it actually impairs your performance the next day as if you had gone on a bender and you have the equivalent of a 0.05 alcohol level, which I think is pretty significant. We don't naturally assume that sleep is going to impact our bodies in that way, but it does. It's a very, very serious impact. We know from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration that 100,000 automobile crashes are directly tied to driver fatigue every year. So this is a really important note to make about sleep. The other thing that is interesting is that other studies have found that if you get 5.5 hours of sleep a night or less, you're actually going to develop abnormal insulin levels and you're going to slow your metabolism. And what that really translates into is that if you do nothing else different, you eat the same and you exercise the same, but you get less sleep, over the course of the year, you will actually gain 12 pounds with nothing else changing. So sleep is truly, truly critical. So you have to develop good sleep hygiene habits. And what that means is you have to create a great environment. It has to be dark, quiet. It should be cool. You actually do want to have your temperature down a little bit. You don't want to have it really warm and toasty at night. But you want to have it a little bit cooler. You don't want to use your bedroom for anything other than sleeping or, I will say it, sex. And we'll talk about that a little bit later just to give you a little titillation there. But you don't want to watch TV. You don't want to actually read in bed. I read in bed almost every night, and I've looked at this study and thought, uh-oh. You don't want to be on your laptop or looking at your iPad. You also don't want to eat 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, and you want to definitely avoid caffeine. If you are a smoker, just know that smoking can also cause insomnia, so that can be impacting your good sleep. And then you want to create these consistent sleep cycles, which clinical researchers call the circadian rhythms. Most of us are programmed to be on for 16 hours and off for 8, which means we should be getting 8 hours of good, solid sleep. So 8 is really the goal that you're going for here. And you want to keep that circadian rhythm consistent even on weekends. And it has to do with the light and dark cycles in our life that help us get that restorative sleep. The other thing I came across is that naps certainly can't make up for sleep deprivation, but often naps can certainly help when you are feeling a little bit fatigued or your energy is a little bit lower. Some famous people, Winston Churchill, John F. Kennedy, Madame Curie, were all great nappers. And again, going back to these circadian rhythms, researchers have found that you do take a dip about 2 p.m. in the afternoon if you're getting your 16 and 8, 16 on, 8 off. You're still going to have a little bit of an energy dip about 2 p.m. So if you take a quick 10 or 20-minute nap, it actually is going to restore you. It's going to renew your energy and get you going again. But just be careful. Don't take a nap longer than 30 minutes because that then gives you sleep inertia, and that's not helpful. So that's what I found. Moving on to our next magnificent 7, certainly supplements and sustenance, or what we're going to call good nutrition and health eating habits. But I call it how to avoid the 30 at 50 trap. And what does that mean? Well, here's what it is all about. A study says that as Americans, we are going to gain 1 to 2 pounds every year after the age of 20. And that, 1 to 2 pounds doesn't sound that bad. But if you add that up, by the time you hit age 50, which is around the average age of our caregivers, 2/3 of Americans are overweight because you have now gained 30 pounds. So this is a really important statistic to look at, and there are a lot of ways, obviously, to combat that. And one of the things we need to think about is that every decade, we actually should be decreasing our calorie intake by about 10%. That'll help self-adjust some of these things that these researchers have found. The other thing that you can do is certainly turn to superfoods, and there's been so much written about this. I came across several different lists, and every list has slightly different variances to it, but the one that I like the best, I'll just read it to you quickly. Blueberries, which are great antioxidants and anti-inflammatories, which helps with lowering your risk of heart disease and cancer. Omega-3 rich fish, which is going to be salmon or sardines, is going to help your heart, your joints, and actually your memory. And some of the research shows that it actually can help reduce depression. Soy is really good, and whether that's soy, tofu, edamame, also almonds and oats and barley can lower your cholesterol. And oatmeal in particular can help regulate your blood sugar level. Just be careful though, because if you have a family history of breast cancer, it is not recommended that you want to add soy to your diet. Certainly fiber, and we all know about that. I like this concept of eating the rainbow daily. So you take your reds, your oranges, your yellows, your greens, your blues, vegetables and fruits, and try to eat one color daily of those different foods. Tea is been shown to lower your cholesterol, and actually the antioxidant power in black tea and green tea is really the same, but green tea does have an added element which helps inhibit growth of cancer cells according to several studies. Certainly calcium, again, is great, although with people who are lactose intolerant you want to be careful, so you can turn to things like salmon, almonds again, or asparagus and figs to help you out with your calcium intake. And we'll talk a little bit later about vitamin D. And then the great news here, dark chocolate, which I loved. I'm like, wow, they're telling me to eat chocolate? That's fantastic. Just be careful. It's not a Milky Way bar. It's chocolate that's 60% in cocoa content. And if you do have 2 ounces a day of dark chocolate, you're going to lower your cholesterol, And you're also going to have 8 times the antioxidant level as a whole bowl of strawberries. So that's the great news on chocolate. Um, the other thing is to know what your BMI is. I don't know if most people know, but BMI is body mass index. And for both men and women, you really want to be between an 18.5 and a 24.9 measurement. And so what does that mean? Well, there are ways to measure your BMI, and certainly we can supply you with the measurement that you can do at home, but it's where you take a calculation of your height and your weight, and then there's some numbers we can give you to come out to that 18.5 to 24.9. Why BMI is really important is that a recent National Cancer Institute study found that women who had a normal BMI and kept it within, or I'm sorry, if they had increased their BMI by 5 points, which actually translates into a 30-pound weight gain. So going back to that 30 at 50, if you've gained 30 pounds over the course of 30 years and you're now 50 years old, what this Cancer Institute study found is that you have double the risk of breast cancer after menopause, as opposed to women who had a healthy BMI consistently through those years. So it is a very important measurement to stay tuned to and pay attention to. The other thing is, nutritional supplements certainly have become more mainstream. We know that 3 out of 5 boomers are turning to supplements when they don't get the proper nutrients in their diet. Daily multivitamin is really crucial. And the other thing is that there is a recent study that shows that an increase in B complex actually helps women with better mental acuity. So that's something to certainly take a look at as well. And then lastly, it's, when it comes to water, there's so much discussion around liquids in our diet and water. I know the Institute of Medicine actually has a recommendation that you have 64 ounces of some type of liquid every day, but I think that probably doesn't go far enough, because if you're drinking diet sodas as part of that 64 ounces daily, it's not really helping you out. There's a lot of recent research and reports that show there's a different measurement that you can consider, and I think it's a good one. And that is that if you weigh, what you should do is take half your weight in ounces, and that's what you should drink in water every day. So for instance, if you are only drinking 64 ounces of water a day, that means you're only weighing 128 pounds. I don't know about everybody on the line, but I haven't weighed 128 pounds for quite a while now. So if you're 140 pounds, you actually want to increase your water uptake to about 70 ounces. And obviously for men who weigh more, if you're an average 180-pound man, then you're wanting to take at least 90 ounces of water in daily. And so it's an important and easy measurement to keep up with. The next S in our Magnificent Seven is sunshine. And really, it's a discussion around vitamin D. There's been so much attention about vitamin D lately, and I think a lot of it is really good. The National Institutes of Health have identified a new depressive disorder, if you will, called seasonal affective disorder. And actually, this is a type of depression that occurs during a certain time of the year, obviously, typically in winter. And it really does affect more women than men, interestingly enough. And what they've found is that an uptake of vitamin D, adding 800 international units of vitamin D to your diet or a supplement daily, is actually going to help you with things like SAD. Or 10 minutes of sunshine a day. You want to be careful about sunscreen and skin cancers, but if you do get 10 minutes of sunshine a day, it actually boosts your natural levels of vitamin D, and it provides that calcium absorption, which is what Vit D is so important for, and that's needed for strong bones. It prevents health risks such as diabetes or multiple sclerosis, can certainly help with osteoporosis, and it helps with your mental health. It has been proven that your brain functionality improves with more sunshine in your life. And this is just an interesting tidbit on that. I came across a study that was published in the Journal of Finance, interestingly enough, and it found that stocks that were traded on sunny days were actually more profitable than those that traded on cloudy days. So we must be having a lot of cloudy days on Wall Street these days. But there is a lot of science behind vitamin D and the health benefits. And a recent report that came out by the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force said, again, if you increase your vitamin D intake by 800 units daily, you're also going to reduce your fall risk. Now, as able-bodied caregivers, this may not be as important, but if you aren't taking as well care of yourself, you do have stress and strain in your body, and you can actually be at risk for falls, and certainly also your older loved one. It's something to think about. So if you increase your VIT-D daily intake, you're going to reduce your fall risk by 17%. The next Magnificent Seven is sweat. And I picked sweat because it's an S word, but really this is more about physical fitness and exercise. And so we've all probably heard, the recommendation that we get 30 minutes daily of some type of cardio exercise where our heart rate is increased. And so whether that's walking, or if you're a runner, if you like bike riding, or maybe hiking, or maybe you like to dance, you take a dance class or sign up for ballroom dancing. Anything that gets your heart rate up is really beneficial. And interestingly enough, a lot of the research now is saying it doesn't have to be 30 minutes straight through. You can actually take 10 minutes 3 times a day and have the same benefit as if you were doing the exercise for a full 30 minutes. So that's something to think about for time-stressed caregivers who don't have even 30 minutes to give. Maybe you can find pockets of 10 minutes a day, 3 times a day to do something. The other thing beyond just physical fitness and cardio is stretching. I know it sounds kind of silly, but truly just getting up in the morning and stretching your limbs, it has a lot of physical benefits. And so whether it's improving your flexibility and circulation, can also alleviate that lower back pain that comes with stress, and can often come too with transferring a loved one from wheelchair to bed, or helping them with toileting. So it's something to think about, is to make sure you're stretching on a daily basis. And then lastly, strength training. The National Center for Health Statistics said that every year we lose 1% of our bone and muscle mass. And the way to combat this is by building up our muscles, obviously, through some type of lifting, light weights. And it will help you with osteoporosis, but it also boosts your energy level, and it's been proven now to improve your mood as well. And so you don't have to run to the gym. You don't have to buy a full gym set, for your garage or whatever. You can do something as simple as taking soup cans, which are about, a low weight, and you can do bicep curls with soup cans, or lift them overhead for like a military type press. The other thing you can do, which requires nothing, is a lunge or a squat. And so if you've got a favorite reality TV show you're watching at night, just get up off the couch and do your exercises during the commercial breaks or whatever, and it actually will really help. The next thing is soothing, and all of these things I've listed here that you see actually boost your immunity. There is a lot of science behind it. It's not just fun, indulgent things that you can do for yourself. And so, interestingly enough, there was a study done in Japan that showed that you get tremendous stress relief from baths, and it not only gives you the stress relief, but it helps you fight colds, because it is improving the stimulation in your vascular and lymph system, and it encourages bacteria destroying properties in your immune system. So baths are actually really critical. I mean, again, they sound indulgent. It's like, wow, when do I have time to take a bath? Well, guess what? It will help your health. So find that 10 minutes for a bath at least once a week, and just zen out in your bath. We've heard a lot about yoga and Tai Chi, and certainly there are tremendous benefits. The Mayo Clinic has a lot of studies now done on both yoga and Tai Chi. And so again, it's not just better flexibility, but it is actually releasing lactic acid in your muscles. And this is going to help you relieve tension, stiffness, and pain and fatigue. It lubricates your joints, so you have better range of motion, again, if you're lifting or stretching, helping your loved one. It actually will lower your heart rate and help your blood pressure. And a lot of the research now is pointing to the fact that yoga or Tai Chi can actually help you prevent heart disease. And we know that heart disease is the #1 killer of women. So, again, as a caregiver, these are things that you can do on your own. Yoga and Tai Chi really don't take a lot of time necessarily, and they don't require a lot of, equipment or outfits. You probably need a yoga mat, but with Tai Chi, I was actually in New York City recently, and they were doing a Tai Chi class in Central Park. And I saw a businessman walk right up to the class, take his jacket off, take off his brogues, and join the class. So it's as simple as that. And it is really beneficial. Aromatherapy, okay, I know this probably sounds very new agey to people out there, but it actually has a lot of benefit. And the science behind it comes from the MD Anderson Cancer Center, which is in Houston, Texas, and also, again, the Mayo Clinic, which is a great source, obviously, of a lot of these clinical studies and research. And what they found with aromatherapy are a few things. First of all, they know that going back to your bubble bath, a bubble bath can actually improve your memory. And so, again, if you're finding yourself distracted and you can't remember a lot of things, so not only is your bath going to help your memory, but as we said earlier, it's going to help you fight your cold and improve your immune system. We also know that things like different scents, they're now using scented handkerchiefs to give to people who are getting MRIs because we are fearful and our stress levels go up when we have to do these tests like an MRI. A scented handkerchief with lavender can actually calm you down. So they're using that quite frequently. Um, they're also finding that kitchen cleaners, which I thought was interesting, can ward off nausea and can actually even energize you. So I don't know what the I don't know what the message is there. I guess if we clean our kitchen more often, we'll actually be more energized. But it is interesting when it comes to aromatherapy. It isn't a new age kind of thing. The Egyptians used it 2,500 years ago. Lavender certainly is a great scent to use to calm you down, to relax you, particularly in the evening. If you have some kind of a lavender scented pillow or even a candle, that is going to help you with your sleep. It can also help treat migraines. And then rosemary is a great essential oil to use to relieve muscle pain. And we know that spearmint adds or aids digestion. So again, these essential oils are really important, and I encourage you to check out aromatherapy as an alternative to, just simply taking Advil or something else that you might turn to help with some of these things. And then lastly, the relaxation response. Some of you may know of Dr. Herbert Benson. He is the founder of the Mind Body Institute at Massachusetts General Hospital. And he's really been a proponent for years now. He wrote his book in the 1970s called The Relaxation Response. And it's really about breathing techniques. It's about taking 10 minutes daily to sit quietly and just listen to your breathing and get rid of all this noise pollution in our lives, all the interruptions, all the cell phones, all the email, all the little ding dings when you get a text. You have to get rid of all of that, and you have to just clear your mind for a few minutes. And what he has found is that if you do this for 10 minutes a day, you're going to remove your fatigue. You're going to help your hypertension if you have it. You can actually reduce your symptoms of asthma. And I will tell you, I am a lifelong asthmatic. I have now used his techniques, and I am no longer on my asthma medication because of this. It helps with constipation, certainly with insomnia, and other things like chest pain or arthritis. So it's really, it doesn't take much, and it is something that can be truly beneficial. And what he found is that if you do this, you'll actually see the benefits within 1 month of doing your breathing techniques every day. The next slide, now that we're almost or more than halfway through, yes, sex. No, I'm just kidding. We don't want to be too titillating here. And no, we're not going to talk about the Kama Sutra for caregivers, and we're not going to talk about 50 Shades of Grey. I'm really use sex because it's an S word, but mostly it's really about intimacy and it's about sharing and tenderness and comfort and connection. And that's really how I think about sex when it comes to caregivers. We know that uh, physical touch is a life force. It does help with healing. And we know obviously stress can make us resistant to almost receiving that kind of comfort or reaching out for the kind of comfort we might need. Going back to that book I mentioned, So Stressed, which is really a great book, by the way, um, they found that 1/3 of women who are between the ages of 18 and 59 actually suffer from a loss of interest in sex because of stress. So, you're a stressed out caregiver, you're taking care of everyone else. The last thing you're probably going to want to do is to have sex. And so, when we look at women and what they're going through, we know that a lot of typical sandwich generation caregivers are facing a lot of loss in their life. First of all, you're facing empty nest syndrome. You're losing your kids. They're finally grown and they're leaving the nest. You might be going through menopause. So in some ways, you're struggling with this, I'm losing my femaleness, if you will. And you're caregiving and you're watching the potential loss of your once vital and strong parent. And that is tremendous amount of loss in your life. So when it comes to intimacy and when it comes to that important physical touch, we almost resist it because we're fearful if we accept it, that might be something we'll lose as well. And we just can't take one more loss. And that is something the research is really showing is vital to help caregivers understand, and to help others who know a caregiver. If you know someone who has a spouse who's going through chemotherapy, and this recently happened with a friend of mine. Here's her husband who is weak and can barely get out of bed, and he's nauseated all the time from the chemo. He can no longer wrap his arms around his wife, and she misses that. You need that in your life. So as a friend, you can give a hug, you can hold someone's hand, and it really helps. I mean, the research is tremendous on this. I came across something that showed that babies in neonatal units who were held and cradled for just a few minutes a day actually thrived and survived versus children or the babies in the study that were ignored and never felt human touch. Their health actually started to take a dive, and they had more health issues. So there is science behind giving hugs and holding hands and all these other things. And lastly, our last S is really about setting limits. This is the caregiver Achilles heel, is what I call it, and it's just learning how to say no in a way that doesn't feel like no. It's learning how to say I just can't take on that, or let me come up with an alternative idea. And I'm not going to linger on this much because really this plays into, I think, a lot of things that Lotsa Helping Hands is about, which is how do you reach out for help and find help, and that helps you with setting these kind of limits and being able to manage it all. Um, okay, we have all these great S techniques, all these things that are going to help as a caregiver, but the one thing that people have come up to me and said is, okay, this is all great, but how do I find the time? I mean, when am I going to do all these great things that are going to help me? And that is a great question. And I think the first thing is that you have to start by self-identifying. This is, as we all know, this is the big thing with caregivers, is that we don't raise our hand and say, I'm a caregiver. I now have special responsibilities and more things I have to do for others. And so how am I going to balance all of this? And most of you probably know that AARP and the Ad Council recently launched a public awareness campaign specifically about this self-identification, how to get people to recognize that, particularly sandwich generation, that this is a role, caregiving, that you are going to play. Interestingly enough, I recently did an interview with former First Lady Rosalind Carter. She identified self-identification as the biggest issue that caregivers face. And when we talked about it, and she was a lifelong caregiver, by the way, starting at the age of 13, caring for her father with terminal leukemia, all the way up through caring for other family members throughout her life. And I asked her, I said, well, so Mrs. Carter, did you identify as a caregiver? And she laughed and she said, you know what, I didn't. I didn't. She said, so I'm classic. She said, I didn't realize I was a caregiver until I started doing all this work. And of course, you know of her her wonderful Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving at the university in Georgia. So it is something that we do have to help ourselves and others identify as caregivers, and it really shows inner strength to ask for help. And so, how do you get help? So a couple things to think about. I found this wonderful image, which I really love, which says career, obviously, but if you take a look, the first four blocks in that building block of career is care. And I thought that was a really interesting visual because really you do have to continually care for yourself throughout your career. And whether that career is being a mom, whether you're working, whatever you're doing, taking care of yourself is really critical. So getting help at work, there's a few things that are going on. First of all, a recent report by the Society of Human Resource Management showed that there's been a decrease actually in employers across the country who are offering some kind of caregiving support. About 10 years ago, it was a high of about 24% of all employers. Now it's down to about 11%. And there's a lot of discussion around what's the reason for that is the economy and cutbacks with benefits. The other thing though is it could be a lack of utilization. We know that a lot of these services don't get used a lot, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe they're not communicated well enough by employers. Maybe employees are resistant or you know reluctant to identify as a caregiver at work because you want to keep your job. But know that there are services that can be offered through employers, and you should check into it through your employee assistance program. Sometimes, and with some employers, you can get the help of a geriatric care manager, and those are really your caregiving coaches out there. They are wonderful resources that can help you navigate and can also help counsel you on the things that you should think about it with regards to your own self-care. Also be familiar with the Family Medical Leave Act, which is a federal program that provides you up to 12 weeks of unpaid time off within a 12-month period. And if you're caring for someone in the military and you're working, you can actually get more than double that. You can get 26 weeks off. Most of the time it's not paid. However, it depends on your employer, and it also depends on the state in which you live. Some states, such as California, Hawaii, Connecticut, Minnesota, are now offering some type of pay during that FMLA leave. So you do want to check into that and see if that can help you. The next thing, as we said, certainly after you self-identify as a caregiver, you're going to reach out, and your family and friends do want to help. It's one of the first things they say, what can I do to help? And Brooks talks about this often, that Lotsa really is the answer to that question for everybody. Whether you need a break caring for your loved one, you have to have somebody sit with them for a while so you can go out and run errands, or maybe they run the errand for you. You can't get to the grocery store, so a friend takes care of it. They're picking up or dropping off your kids at school. They're delivering meals. Whatever it is, you do need to accept that help. And you need to understand it's important to ask, and it's important to receive the help. And again, I think Lotsa makes that a really easy, simple, but powerful way to get that help for caregivers. The next thing I found, and I want to make sure that I recognize this group, I have something I call the Me Time Monday. I do video tips that are on our YouTube channel at Caregiving Club that take a different caregiving topic and talk about, okay, every Monday check in with yourself, and are you finding me time? Are you finding those minutes to really concentrate on yourself? Me time is something that's been written about by Dr. Oz and Louise Hay and a lot of other wonderful doctors and others out there, and it's really about finding time just for you. It's a focus on just you. And what I love is the Monday Campaigns, which is a nonprofit organization out in New York. They are very focused on a variety of different campaigns that use Monday as a start point and a check-in point, so that every Monday you get a chance to take a look and say, okay, what did I do this week? Or let's use Monday as the day that I spend on me, spending a few minutes just focusing on me. It's all based on science. They have a lot of research that has been done by Johns Hopkins University and others that say Monday really is kind of in our cultural DNA. It's our reset button. It's the day that we say, okay, I'm going to start a new diet, or I'm going to start a new exercise. But what I love about Monday the Monday concept versus a New Year's resolution, if you will. Most of us make these resolutions and we don't keep them. The science shows that 46% of people who make a New Year's resolution actually don't keep up with it by June. But with Monday, you have 52 chances during the year to reset. You have 52 chances to say, okay, last week I blew it. I didn't get my me time. But you know what? I know why that hung me up, and I can do it this week. So you feel more positive about what you're trying to do, and you really see progress. And it's very similar to the concept that like Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig uses, where every week you get a chance to see your progress, you get a chance to see your success, and that keeps you going. And I think that whole concept of Me Time Monday is great, and I would encourage you to check out the Caregivers Monday website, which is something that the Monday campaigns launched specifically for caregivers, which with a lot of other great tips and advice. And so lastly, we come to, okay, we've heard how to banish stress and beat burnout. We've learned how to get help, ask for help, where to find it, whether it's at work, whether it's through family and friends. We've learned how to use a technique called the Monday concept and get your me time on Monday. And it's really all about balancing self-care while caregiving. And I have a little story for you. I call it two for the seesaw. And I want you to think of yourself standing in the middle of a seesaw. One end is all about your loved one's needs, and that can be more than just your older parent, can be everybody in your life. They all have needs. But the other end is all about you. It's about your needs. And neither side of this seesaw is really more important than the other. If you step too far to either end, then the seesaw is going to tip and everything is out of balance and you could possibly fall off and hurt yourself. So your goal is really to maintain that balance in the middle of the seesaw. So that's the visual that I will leave you with. And the next page, I think, are some resources I mentioned throughout this. And I just really appreciate your attention and hope that you found a lot of this information interesting and helpful.
Great, Sherri. Thank you so much for sharing the Magnificent Seven. That's such a wonderful way for people to remember all of those important tips for balancing self-care while caregiving. And I'm sure our audience gained so much. I know there were a bunch of things that I had never known before that I definitely learned myself. And so we look forward to sharing that back out with the larger audience at Lotsa as well. So thank you. And I just wanted to highlight again Sherri's book that is coming out in February. It offers interesting stories about caregivers, interviews with celebrities that are listed here, and really a step-by-step lessons, if you will, related to caregiving, and in all told in Sherri's very creative and compelling style. So we will make sure to notify everyone who registered for the webinar when you're able to pre-order a cast of caregivers, excuse me. So thank you for letting our audience know about that as well, Sherri.
Great, thank you.
We are out of time almost. We have 2 minutes left, so I just wanted to leave folks with contact information for Sherri. We know that we did not have time for a lot of questions this afternoon, but we will be placing a recorded version of this webinar on our website, and we'll let you know when that is available. And we also have a place there where people can post questions, either for Lotsa or for Sherri, and we'll make sure that we get those questions answered real quickly for you. So we encourage you to check out the Caregiving Club at caregivingclub.com and participate in social media with Caregiving Club as well. They are always turning out wonderful resources for caregivers. If you are interested in connecting with Lotsa Helping Hands, we invite you to visit lotsahelpinghands.com and also join with us in social media to hear about the latest resources and upcoming webinars, as well as information about using your Lotsa Helping Hands community. So in conclusion, I just wanted to thank Sherri again so much for providing all this wonderful information to our listeners this afternoon. As I said, I know I learned a lot. I'm sure they did as well. And we look forward to hearing from future, from future experts in the months ahead, which will include Sherri as we round out the year of our inspirational series. And we do hope that you all share with us topics that you'd like to hear as it relates to caregiving so that we can continue to provide these informational webinars for you, our members, our most important group of people that we work with. So thank you, Sherri, and thanks to all for participating, and have a wonderful afternoon.